Hi, I want to talk about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. It seems like so many people are talking about diabetes as if it was just one disease. And that the difference between type 2 and type 1 just has to do with whether you are insulin dependent or not. And this is a very simplistic view or assumption, I should say, and it doesn't actually highlight the differences between the underlying pathology, the cause of the disease, which is type 1 or type 2 diabetes. And I want to highlight that they're pretty much the opposite. So let's have a look at type 1 first, because that one is quite simple. We know exactly what the cause is and what we need to do about it. So type 1 is just an autoimmune condition, and that is where your immune system, for some reason, think that your pancreatic cells in your pancreas that produce insulin somehow are a threat. So they go out and they destroy these cells so that you can no longer produce any insulin at all. So that is type 1. You literally have no function in your pancreas in early stages. If you catch it early, some people might have a little bit of function in the pancreases, but as a general rule of thumb, if you've had type 1 diabetes for any amount of time, you probably don't have any function in your pancreas left at all, because these cells are destroyed. So this is clearly a problem in terms of survival. Because we need the pancreas and we need insulin. Insulin is really important for a lot of functions, but especially needed for carbohydrate metabolism. So when you have type 1, you must be on insulin shots. If you don't get insulin therapy, you're gonna die. You cannot eat your way out of type 1 diabetes. You can lower your insulin requirements, you can control your blood sugar better with a lower carbohydrate diet, etc., but you still need insulin. Okay? Type 2, on the other hand, is totally different. So it's pretty much the opposite. This is a condition where you have too much insulin and where you have had too much insulin for way too long. So it's a bad case of insulin resistance. And at some point, I'm going to make a video on the different stages of insulin resistance, which were developed by a physician called, I think it was a physician anyway, Joseph Kraft. So I'm going to go through that. But let's just say that for you to develop type 2 diabetes, it's going to take a few years, most likely. So you're going to have to go through different stages to get to a diagnosis. That doesn't mean that someone who looks healthy on the outside, someone who has perfect blood sugars, isn't insulin resistant. You won't know that unless you are actually checking what their insulin is doing. And it's easy to do. You can just go to your doctor and ask for a fasting insulin blood test. However, these tests are somewhat inaccurate because insulin is released in bursts, so it just releases in different impulses. So it totally depends on when you take that test. It might show a lot higher or a lot lower than your average, but what you can see is that if it is definitely really high, you can probably tell that you are having a problem there and that you're insulin resistant because your body's producing more insulin than what is normal. Okay? So too much insulin is not a good thing. Increased insulin is actually what is associated with the risk for other diseases like coronary artery disease, heart attack, stroke, cancer, etc. It's not the high blood sugar in itself. It's the insulin, it's the high insulin. So if you go on Google and you search for any modern disease and insulin or insulin resistance, you will see that there is a correlation pretty much. So as you can see, it's unfortunate that type 1 and type 2 share the same name because they need to be treated in completely different ways. Type 1 should always be treated with insulin. Type 2, in my opinion, should not be treated with insulin. there is a grey zone area there. If your pancreas is really failing and there is no other alternative, a type 2 might have to go on to insulin treatment. But I think before we get there, there's so many things you can do. So what type 2s actually need is to decrease their insulin levels, because we're not having an insulin deficiency here, we have too much insulin. So what you need to do is obviously eat a diet that doesn't require as much insulin, so that your pancreas can just relax and not produce so much insulin. But I'm talking about this in other videos, so in this video I just wanted to highlight the difference between type 1 and type 2, and I want you to keep this in mind. So if someone comes up to you and they tell you that so-and-so has diabetes and they're taking insulin and they are managing their blood sugars just fine, you might want to question, is this person type 1 or type 2? Is this relevant to your condition? Because if it's someone who's type 1, it's really a totally different disease, and it's something that actually concerns your specific condition. If it's another type 2 person, you might want to listen. Maybe there is something there. Maybe that's something that you can take with you and maybe discuss with your doctor. So if you want more tips on how to do that, just hit the subscribe button below so that you will get notified every time we release a new video. And you can also join our Facebook group, where we will be able to answer any of your questions in more detail.